I started listening to this radio show, these two real estate investors talking about stuff. And pretty soon I realized after a few months, I had a choice. Either I stay in my profession and just keep making money, or I keep my integrity intact and leave. So I chose the latter. I left. I said, I'm done. I'm out of here. I will never teach about money again. I will just be a mortgage broker, and I'll teach some ballroom dancing at the side at Utah Valley University.
Hey, to whoever may need this nugget of encouragement, things will be all right. So quit your work.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've already enjoyed so much just chatting with you and getting to know you a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to do this podcast with you.
Absolutely. Let's go. Let's do this.
So one thing I want to say before we get started, I mean, you have a podcast, you just told me, with over 800 episodes, which seems like would take a long time to do. What is some of your favorite phrases, questions, or things to do to build rapport with like guests or co-hosts on your podcast?
Yeah, I like just to really get into people's backstory, right? Just ask them like, hey, tell us your story. How'd you get to where you are today? And usually we have a focus, like a topic or something like that. But just getting the backstory, get to know them a little bit. Sometimes it's kind of fun just to get their why. Like I'll ask that sometimes at the end is, why? Like what do you feel like your purpose is here on this planet? It could be feel like your purpose is what you're doing every day. Why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of times they go from like left brain, like this is what I do, to here's why I do it. Here's where my heart comes out, and that's really fun.
Yeah, that seems fun because whenever you get into the deeper of why I'm doing this, people's like passion comes out. I feel like a little bit more because we do spend a lot of time just doing the monotonous day-to-day things.
Yeah.
And our why is what drives us, but a lot of times we're not thinking about it. It's more subconscious.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So just to get started, what is your why? Why do you think you've been here, placed on this earth?
I have my own like little mission statement that I have that applies not just in business, but personal life and everything else as well. Is that I'm really here to establish higher standards of service, perseverance, and stewardship to create happy, fruitful lives. And so my why is really like help people raise the bar, right? Like to kind of go from the mediocre, go from the ordinary to the extraordinary, right? How do you get them to kind of traverse over that hump? Because so many people get stuck in a rut. They just get stuck in doing what's expected of them, right? Doing just the same old, like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go to college and get a good job, and then I'm supposed to get married and have kids, and then I'm supposed to like do a few vacations and then retire and then I die, like it kind of sounds like a really boring life when you think about it. And if you get people to kind of think beyond that and think, well, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind, right? Like, what do you want to do in the here and now? And I think legacy is something you can create while you're alive, not just when you're dead. Some people think, oh, I can, donate a whole bunch of money, have a building named after me like this, right? Well, that's cool. But more importantly is what do you do with the people around you, your friends, right? Your kids even, like, what do you do to actually help their lives be better? How do you make sure that you do kind of what Steve Jobs talks about, which is you leave a footprint on the planet where you leave this planet better off than when you came to it? And I think that's kind of like my why, my goal is how can I help people do that and create that ripple effect, which is why I call my company Money Ripples, right? It's how do you create that ripple effect through people's lives? Because as you're blessed and prospered financially, you have a greater capacity to bless the lives of those around you. So as you prosper, you bring others with you versus just, hey, I'm gonna live a nice, comfortable life, just take care of my family, which to me is one of the most selfish things you could ever do is say, I just wanna live a comfortable life and take care of my family. And then some people would say, oh, that's not selfish. But I would argue with that. I was like, no, if you're just thinking about your family, that is a selfish thing. But if you can view the world as more your family, now we're talking. Now you're actually doing something that is more than just thinking about yourself.
Yeah. Like the human family, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Were you a scout when you were younger?
No, but I made fun of them as they wore their little outfits and stuff. No,
Yeah.
no. In Oregon, it wasn't as big of a thing like here in Utah, where like scouts is like everybody had done scouts.
Yeah.
In Oregon, it was like the very small minority ever did scouts. So I never did that. But funny enough, when I came to Utah, I probably became a scout leader or a Cub Scout leader like 3 or 4 times. So definitely the values they teach are awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. I remember one of the quotes that we always said, which was leave like the campsite better than you found it.
Yeah.
So that was what came to my head whenever you were saying, yeah, you got to leave a footprint, leave the planet better than you found it.
That's right.
And that's always something that has kind of been instilled in me, and I really like it. That's one of the things that's been instilled in me. It involves a lot of integrity and self-discipline, to, even if you're like in the bathroom, right?
Uh-huh.
You could just like leave the paper towel on the sink, right? All that kind of stuff.
I was
Or
wondering where this is going. You're saying the bathroom. I'm like, what happens in the bathroom now?
no. And then you could just like leave it there on the sink, or you could throw it in the garbage, right?
Yeah.
Or you just see someone didn't throw theirs in the garbage, right? Pick it up, throw it in
Right.
the garbage. And I feel like that's something that I naturally do now.
Yeah.
But I do feel like that's been, because it's been instilled in me, this small little leave the campsite better than you found it. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I know who you are, Chris. I've heard you speak a
Mhm.
couple times, but let's do a little introduction on you. Give us like your 30-second elevator pitch. Who is Chris Miles? Ready, go.
30 seconds. That's it? Oh
Well,
my gosh. You know,
Elevator pitch, elevator
Yeah.
short. It's
I'm
4 floors.
my moniker is the anti-financial advisor because I think financial advisors kind of suck, right? I used to be one. That's why I can say that. But my big pitch is that I was actually able to retire twice by the time I was 39 years old. Not because I'm amazing, but because I screwed up the first time. I had to do it again. But really, I help people liberate them by creating enough passive income so that they become work optional. They work because they want to, not because they have to. And as they're blessed financially, they can now go and bless more lives too.
Perfect. And time, that was like 26. You
I
beat
know.
it.
And that's even with me BSing a little bit, right?
Yeah. And so one of your favorite things to talk about is passive income.
Mhm.
That's the whole idea of Money Ripples and what you do now. And I kind of know you as the passive income king.
Mhm.
Tell us your little definition of passive income, something that yours is a little bit different than what the majority of people think, right?
Yeah, because if you turn on like TikTok or Instagram and or any kind of ads or whatever you might see on YouTube, people talk about passive income. But really what they're telling you is that it's usually like start some online business or some like real estate business that is anything but passive, right? It's a lot of energy and a lot of work so that someday you might have a little bit of extra money coming in. When I talk about passive income, I mean like true passive income where you're not having to work for it as much, right? Where money is coming to you on a regular basis, where you're able to have that money come and pay for whatever. So, for example, if you don't have money, it's really hard to create passive income. I'll say that much, right? Now, you can create income without money, right? But it requires time and energy, and some
Correct.
skills or some value you have to exchange. But for the most part, the only way to create true passive income is to take your money and get it working harder for you so you don't have to work so hard for it, right? And the ideal is that if you get enough passive income coming in every month that you can cover all of your bills and your necessities, you're now financially independent. You're in a place where you work because you want to, not because you have to. And that to me is like that first level of freedom.
Yeah. And that goes back to your mission statement, right? Help people create that freedom. And that's going back to this passive income idea.
Yeah.
Have you, by chance, read the old book? It's called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I finished that book today. I've been reading it. I was helping clean out my grandpa's office.
Uh-huh.
And we're just throwing out a ton of books, donating all of them to the DI.
Uh-huh.
And I was like frantically like, are there any good ones in here? Are there any good ones?
Mhm.
And my uncle just came up and just handed me this little yellow book, The Richest Man in Babylon. He's like, this is a good one. So I've been reading that. And they talk about that a lot in there.
Yeah.
Where it just, with different stories, different like parables
Mhm.
of like, make your money work for you.
Right.
Save that money and make it work for you. So what are some of the ways that you teach people to have that money work for you through passive income?
Yeah, kind of like that talks about is almost like making it your employee, right?
Mhm.
Does it work well for you? Is it not? So when I talk to people, we go outside the traditional mainstream things that financial advisors talk about because let's be honest, if you talk about what financial advisors teach, it's pretty boring. It's usually pay off all your debt and then save up all your money in mutual funds, and then eventually someday you might have enough to do something with it. And then they'll tell you, even when you get to that point of retirement, they'll say, well, only pull off 3% a year. If you pull off too much, you could die and run out of money before you die, right? Well, here's the problem is like, for example, Fidelity, is like the biggest 401k provider out there. They have 45 million clients. Only 810,000, about 1.8%, have $1 million or more. Despite
Wow.
people have been saving into these for decades and they're getting employer matches. You know how everybody tells you, oh, get that employer match. It's free money. It's brainless.
Yeah.
But the problem is the 401ks don't even perform that well. They don't even do as well as the stock market. So you're making a crappier return. And even with the match, you barely make market returns. And the stock market doesn't make as much as what financial advisors claim. It doesn't make 12%, it makes like 8% if you're lucky. And so when you combine all that together, you realize, well, no wonder people can't hit $1 million. Even though they're saving away, they're barely getting there. And like I said, 1.8% of people actually have over $1 million. And of those, there's another survey done that 35%. So really, now you're going from 1.8% to only like 1%, but about 2/3 of that, 1.8 of that 1.8% say that it'll take a miracle for them to be able to retire. Why? Because if you have $1 million and you live on 3% a year, that's $30,000 a year. That's $2,500 a month. Think about that. You're a broke millionaire. And that's before you pay taxes. You guys still have to pay tax on the money because they tell you, oh yeah, you get tax advantages. No, you don't. You just delay it for another day when you have no kids to write off. You probably paid off your mortgage, so you don't have any interest write off. So if you're a normal W-2 employee, you got 0 write-offs, and now you're like paying tax on that money. Maybe you're lucky to walk away with $2,000 a month after having $1 million. You might as well be living in a tent in Carlsbad, California, because that's about how much they live on too. Right? Because you got to live in California. It's like $2,000 a month probably to be homeless,
to eat air. Like that's how much it costs in California.
Exactly. That's why there's a third of those people that are freaking out saying, I don't know, I don't think I'll be able to retire because they're older. They're already there. They're realizing the reality of this isn't working. Now might be some people who are younger with $1 million thinking, well, it's okay. I've got time.
Yeah.
But how much time do you really have? What if you die between now and then? You just die with a stupid, piece of, really just this stupid 401k plan or IRAs that go to your kids and then they have to pay tax on it, right? So what's the purpose? Why go through all that crap to have no real benefit in your life right now? So what I teach is instead what if we get that money out of prison? Get out of that 401k prison. Stop trying to pay off your debt early. I'm not saying being debt free isn't a good thing, but some people are so gung-ho about it and then they get debt free and then they come out reaching out to us saying, well, hey, I'm debt free. I've got money in these mutual funds and I still can't retire. I can't do anything, right? Well, great. What if we just took that money instead and got it to work for you? And so a lot of places we look at is more like real estate-based investments. Because if you try to gamble at the stock market, you will lose. At some point, you're going to lose money. But in real estate, I have a real asset, which is why it's called real estate. If I put it into real estate, it doesn't even have to be rentals in my backyard. I can actually invest anywhere in the country because there's companies out there that help match me up, finding properties, and then I don't have to manage them. They'll have their own property managers do it all for me, and then I get paid the cash flow. So for example, I use this example just in a masterclass I did recently where I bought a property in Memphis 6 years ago. It was a $32,000 down payment, got a mortgage for the rest. And the cash flow on that in the beginning was about $340 a month, which by the way, is about a 13% a year, what they call cash on cash return. So my $32,000 was paying me net profit after I paid the property manager and my mortgage payments. I'm making 13% a year. I'm already kicking the crap out of the stock market just then. But wait, there's more, right? Because it doesn't stop there. One, because my mortgage payment's taken out of that, my renters are paying down my mortgage for me. I'm gaining equity even if the property doesn't appreciate. But if it does appreciate, I make even more money. Because here's the thing, and this blew my mind in my 20s when I heard this. I was a financial advisor and I went to go watch this real estate presentation and I thought it was too good to be true. Like, there's no way. But for example, if in that property I put $32,000 down, right? Well, I put down 20%. Now, if the property appreciates 10%, I don't make 10% on that money. I make 50%. Because let me illustrate this in this way. If you have a $100,000 property and you put, say, 20% down, that's $20,000, right? Now, if that property goes up 10%, you're now at $110,000 of value, right? Well, I didn't make 10% because remember, I only put down $20,000. That $20,000 to make 10% appreciate, that $10,000 appreciation is not 10%, it's 50% because 20,000 and 10,000, that's 50% of the 20. So really I'm making that plus the cash flow, plus they're paying down my mortgage for me. And so what's fascinating is I did a comparison. I said, what if I put my money in just the S&P 500, which is what everybody compares to, is like the gold standard of the market, right? I would have, if 6 years ago in May of 2018, yeah, I have to do math here because I'm a money guy. What do I know about math? So May of 2018, right? If I would have put money in the market like 32,000, I would have about 65,000 today. So I would have more than doubled. So the market did well, way better than average in the last 6 years. But my property made me over 135,000.
Whoa.
So I made 100,000 on top of the 32,000. Now I didn't just double, I did like about over 300, almost going on to 400% return total on my property. By the way, here's what's cool. Because if I were to try to take that 65,000, take 3% out of the stock market, I'm making like $1,950 a year, right? A year. So $1,900 a year, that's like $150 a month. But with my property now, I'm actually cash flowing about $9,700 a year after all expenses are paid.
Okay.
So I'm making way more money and I have way more value. This is why people accidentally, even with real estate, become millionaires.
Accidentally.
Accidentally. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
people that just buy properties and they're like, oh, cool, I made money. Because real estate values consistently go up. Where the stock market can go like this. It's like your bipolar ex-girlfriend that you're really kind of scared to ever date again, but you can't look away, right? It's like that.
You're like, everyone's telling you that she's great, and you're like, maybe she was. There was some times, but
Yeah, she might have been hot and sexy, but the truth is that it's the craziness is not worth it,
yes.
right? And that's what the stock market's like. And so now rentals is not the only way you can invest in real estate, of course, but that's just like one example because most people have heard of that.
Yeah.
But what I discovered when I was in my 20s, and this is why I left being a real estate, or not being a real estate investor, the reason I left being a financial advisor was because when I realized that I could also lend my money to real estate investors and get paid 10% plus returns on that money, and I even have ownership on the property like a bank does when they lend you money, I could do that. I can invest in oil and gas and own the land and get paid royalties off that. I can actually have a partnership right now where I'm a 70% partner where I finance everything, but the 30% partner does all the work.
That sounds amazing.
He's buying and selling, transacting raw land. The last 2.5 years, we've taken 200 grand, reinvested it over and over with the cash flow coming in. So it's over 400,000 total invested, but it's paying me over $11,000 a month. So, I mean, it's making me about $135,000 a year with that 400,000, right? And that just keeps growing. So I'm taking that cash flow and reinvesting it some more and building it some more.
Making it work for you.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways. You can invest in apartment buildings, but if you don't have the money for the whole apartment, you get what's called a syndication where everybody pools their money together and then you buy the apartment as a partnership, or you do a car wash. You can actually invest in car washes. You can invest in things like self-storage units, which work great in a recession because people downsize their house, but they still have junk, so they don't know where to throw it. They throw it in their self-storage unit, right? I mean, there's so many ways you can make money in real estate-based stuff that when you start looking at the stock market, you say, wait, this bipolar thing that might make me 8% a year, but I can make double-digit returns in these things and have less risk. To me, that's a no-brainer. And that's the thing that's been proven. We've already proven that 401ks don't work for people, but we have seen that there's 25 million millionaires in the United States, and almost all of them have real estate in their portfolio.
Wow. And so at what point in your 20s did you find this out and say, I'm going in?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I actually went to this college, right?
Utah Valley University, right?
Utah Valley University, right. And while I was here, I realized pretty quickly as I started to see the professors that were successful versus those that were just employees, I realized that I should have my own business, right? I should take the entrepreneur path. Didn't know what I was going to do, but I figured I shouldn't just go and finish my degree and then go get my MBA and then have no business experience. So I actually took a hiatus. I was going to take a 1 year off of college to go and just find some business to start, right? And I did that with one class to go with my bachelor's. I put a pause on it, went to go find some business, and I found one, which was being a financial advisor. Not realizing it was so easy to get into because they'll take anybody with a heartbeat as long as you can pass a test, right? Well, I did that, and I love being an entrepreneur. I loved having control of my time, the amount of money I can make. I mean, I got bit by the entrepreneur bug. And so I did that for about 4 years. Well, during that time, my dad then, he reached out to me. He says, well, Chris, when do you become my financial advisor? Now, understand that this guy was like dirt cheap. He was a penny pinching saver. He was stuffing money in his 401k. He paid off his house and his debt, all of it early, right? He was doing everything that you've been taught to do your whole life. And as I sat down with him, he says, Chris, I'm 61 years old. I want to retire. I said, Dad, if you want to retire today, based on the money you have in your retirement accounts, you better hope you die in 5 years because that's when you're going to run out of money.
Sheesh.
Again, a guy that saved his whole life. I mean, took care of us kids, paid off all his debt, including his house. He was supposed to be the free guy that yells freedom, on the Dave Ramsey show, right?
Yeah.
And look at his life as like, dude, you're going to run out of money. And so he had to keep working into his 70s to keep his life going. And it bugged me because I was selling the dream. I was selling hopium, right? People were hoping that they would actually make money in these investments with mutual funds in the stock market. But when I looked at it in reality, I remember there was a friend of mine that he said, well, Chris, how many of your clients are financially free where they don't worry about money? I said, well, they all worry about money. They all worry about running out of money too soon, right? He said, well, that's a problem. Well, how about this, Chris? If anybody's got this figured out, it should be you guys. How many of you as financial advisors are financially free, not off the sales and the commissions that you're earning, but actually doing these investments? And this was in about 2005, 2006. And when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, there's guys been working here since the late 1970s, since like the time I was born, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, there's still guys working here. They can't retire either. He says, there's your problem. I said, all right, well, what do I do? Give me the answer. He's like, I'm not going to give you the answer because you're a financial advisor. You're not open to anything anyways. I said, come on, man. Like, you got me to admit that I'm open. I'm admitting that, yes, you're right. What do I do? He's like, well, if you're really serious, and I don't think you are. This guy was like the best salesman. He didn't even know it. But he was serious. He really thought I was not open because I was arguing with him that stocks were better than real estate investing. He's like, all right, well, go get this book by Robert Kiyosaki, not Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because he already knew I read that book a couple times. He's like, go get the book, Who Took My Money? Which is basically a book that says, don't buy mutual funds. They suck, right? And so I read that book. I got it on audiobook. I read it in 3 hours, right? I realized, okay, good points there. And then he says, listen to this AM Talk radio show. This is pre-podcast era, right? And so I started listening to this radio show, these two real estate investors talking about stuff. And pretty soon I realized after a few months, I had a choice. Either I stay in my profession and just keep making money, or I keep my integrity intact and leave. So I chose the latter. I left. I said, I'm done. I'm out of here. I will never teach about money again. I will just be a mortgage broker, and I'll teach some ballroom dancing at the side at Utah Valley University. And that's kind of what I did. But I wanted to know what these guys knew. And so I started to learn about real estate investing. And it's not about accumulating money, but instead accumulating or compounding your income, right? Creating cash flow, passive income. That's where real freedom happens. And so later that next year, later in 2006, as I started to get some things working, and I had a young family, I only needed like $3,500 a month to live on. Later that next year, I was actually able to retire, where I was only working maybe a couple hours a week doing those activities, but I had enough money that I didn't have to keep working, even as a mortgage broker. In fact, I started referring my business to those guys and then taking a cut on the back end, taking a 50% cut by just referring them clients, and I did none of the work, and that ended up being a good, sweet deal too. By the way, that's one way you can make money, even though I wouldn't call it passive income. I'd call it more like residual income by being a good referral source. I was just connecting people and making money that way too. So between the real estate and doing that, I had enough money. I was making like $4,000 or $5,000 a month. And that's where I was kind of like, well, what do I do with my life? Right. I'm 28 years old. All my friends are working jobs. It's not like I can go hang out with them in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
What do I do? And that's where I realized that teaching is the thing I'm really passionate about, right? It doesn't matter if it's ballroom dancing or even about helping people out. Because the truth is, you're 28 years old and you're like, I'm retired. People are like, how in the heck did you do that? Like, teach me, right?
Yeah.
And so I was just doing it for free on the side, but nobody would actually do anything if I didn't charge them. So eventually, 2007, I came out of retirement, partnered with a guy named Garrett Gunderson. We created a company that eventually became Wealth Factory and started trying to teach people how to get out of the rat race and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what got me down this path. And over the years, I've kept just perfecting it, gaining more wisdom. Obviously, I lost everything and more. I didn't go bankrupt, but I would have been better off if I did. During the last recession, that 2008 recession, I got my butt kicked big time. Bad time to start a business, and it was a bad time to have real estate go down the tube at the same time. So I ended up over $1 million in debt, and I had to actually pay it all off, even if I had to negotiate some of those debts too. And then by end of 2016, it was, I actually was able to do it again. I was able to be financially independent. But, it's interesting because you hear people talk about like the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like in 2008, I was teaching people how to get out of the rat race, but I was back in it. And I stopped doing that. I started teaching people how to free up cash flow, because cash flow creates freedom, right? Just like my shirt says. Well, I was teaching people how to get creative and resourceful with the money they have so that without even investing, just trying to save money on taxes or ways to track money and things like that. I started doing that instead. It was like the best thing ever because I was just teaching the things I was having to do for myself in my own life, right? Because when people would sit down with me, they're like, Chris, I would love to pay you, but I honestly can't find the money. And I'm like, I'm over $1 million in debt. I wouldn't say this out loud because that would be like business suicide. But I'm thinking your situation is way easier than mine. I would love to help you out. And so I tell them, hey, if I could help you out, would you pay me? They're like, yeah, if you can help me find the money, I'll pay you. And that's how I started getting a relaunched business again. And then eventually, of course, years later, when I started investing and stuff. Then I started bringing in the whole passive income and investing in real estate and things like that. But I'll tell you, like that, I remember thinking in that period of time, I said, if I can get out of this, because in 2006, I kind of wondered, was I just lucky? Was it just market timing? But I thought, if I can get out of this hole, even though I've got collectors calling me multiple times a day, and basically my wife at the time, and she would say, should I just take my kids and move in with my sister and you till you figure your stuff out? I mean, it was pretty messy, right? And of course, all your family's like, you should go back to college and get that sociology degree because it should work. You'll get a job with that somehow. And so they're telling me all this stuff, right? And so like all the headwinds were blowing against me. But I was like, you know what? If I could do it again, a second time, now I can prove I wasn't just lucky. This is formulaic. This actually works. And so by the time I did it by December 2016, I was like, holy cow, I have over 10,000 a month coming in passively. I'm there. That's when I realized I did it. I did it again. It's not just something I was teaching by theory. It's something that works in practice. It's not just reading Rich Dad Poor Dad or reading, even any other books that are all about money that seem great in theory, but it was actually practiced and worked. It was like Rich Dad Poor Dad applied in real life. And that's the big thing I try to teach people is like, you can learn all day long, but until you actually put it into practice, it doesn't mean squat, right? It's really about how you actually make it work in your life.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's amazing. I love hearing about the fact that you retired, came out of retirement, lost everything, was like further in debt, and then decided to keep going with it. I know a lot of people, 2008, the more I talk with people, they're similar to your age.
Yeah.
And these entrepreneurs, they often started businesses right around 2008. And they always, oh my gosh, it was the worst, right?
Yeah.
And it was like the worst timing. And so I'm seeing that your generation, that was something that has really developed resilience for you guys. And the people who came out of that and still said, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to keep doing this. They're like really strong and they've been able to persevere through almost anything else. Like COVID, they're like, got that. I can do that. I
can do a couple months. That's better than a couple years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because a lot of them I talked to had real estate and land and all that kind of stuff. And it was really hard for them. Yeah. So how was retiring in your 20s, how did that differ from what you thought it would be?
Yeah.
You said that, oh yeah, I can't go hang out with my buddies. They're all at work, right? But what did you think retirement was going to be like? And then what was it really like?
Yeah, what I thought it was going to be like is if I was lucky, especially because I was thinking like from a financial advisor mutual fund game, if I could just be cheap enough for like the next 15 years, by the time I'm 40, I'll be financially set for life, right? I'll have $2 million saved up and I'll live on $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month. To me, like back then, especially when I was in my 20s, I was like, whoa, that's a lot. I mean, that's like someone saying today, instead of $5,000 a month, I can live on $10,000 a month, which a lot of people do say, if I just have $10,000 a month, I'm set, right? Well, just wait another 10, 15 years, you'll say you'll need $20,000 a month, right? Well, that was my goal. And then I get there and I realize, wait, like it wasn't about how much I saved up. It was, how does my money actually work for me? How does that create income? And when I had the income coming in, I was like, well, crap, that was easier than I thought. And what surprised me the most, so people will say, Chris, like obviously you can retire now, like you've got like over 40, almost 50,000 a month passively coming in. Why do you have to keep doing a business? Why would you do that? And my answer is, it's because you've never been there. You wouldn't know. Because you've been working so hard your whole life, you think you just want to escape it. But when you get to a place where you don't have to work anymore, that's when you start to ask yourself, what do I want my days to look like? What's really important to me? Because I could have retired comfortably and just taken my family, like I said at the beginning of this, right? If you just want to be selfish, just take care of your family. I could have done that. But I feel like God blessed me in a way that I had something to share. I had something that I can offer to help other people. Yeah, I can just live my quiet life and really life would be simpler. It would be nice. But the truth is that I feel like, it's like with Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. I feel that same calling. And so it's really a personal question that everybody has to ask themselves, which is, okay, if I were in that place where I didn't have to work anymore, what would I want to spend my time doing? And I'll tell you, even after the second time I retired, like beginning of 2017, I was living in California for a few months. We would go snowbird. We'd go pick somewhere every year. We still do it to this day. We go pick somewhere to snowbird each winter because Utah winters kind of get cold.
Yeah.
And so we would go somewhere warmer. So I spent like a good couple months in California. And I'll tell you, I loved it, but I was so unfulfilled and bored because I didn't have to work. But at the same time, I was like, yeah, but what's my purpose here? What am I going to be doing that makes my life quality and worthwhile? And so when I came back, I said, you know what? I got to do something. Even if it's part-time, I have to do something. And I've learned that for me, and it's different for everybody else, there has to be a balance. Like for me, if I don't work at least, 10 hours a week, right? Now if I work 40 hours a week, I burn out. But if I don't work at least 10 hours a week, well, then my fire burns out. And that's even worse because then you get depressed. Then you
Yeah.
feel like you lose hope. And this is why you hear the stories about old retirees when they finally retire. When they get there, then they end up dying like 5 years later
Yeah.
because they just lose that purpose, right? And so when you have that purpose and it's something that drives you, then your life's worth living. And I'm not saying, by the way, if you don't have purpose, stop living your life. I'm not giving you permission there to get an escape route here. I'm just saying that you want your life to be more than just work and then not work. There's got to be something else that you can do. And that's why I don't say, here's how I get people to retire. I tell them how to get you to be work optional. Because the truth is, I know, especially your generation, I mean, millennials and Zs, right? Both generations are like, yeah, I want the flexibility to not work, but I kind of want to keep working. I don't want to just stop and just do nothing. I don't want to sit on a front porch drinking lemonade because I can't afford to go anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
I want to do something else, like even if it's for my community, for society, something that matters, right?
Yeah.
And I think you should. And so that's the thing I think people don't realize. They never think beyond just trying to get to that point of freedom or retirement. They always think like they just want to get there and then they'll figure it out. It's like, no, if you want to get there faster, a vision will pull you, as Steve Jobs says, right? If you have a big enough vision, it's powerful enough, it'll pull you there. Figure out what your next is even before you get there. If you understand like what it is you're aiming for and what that next step is for you in life, then I can promise you, you will get to that goal faster.
I love that. So as someone who is young in college,
Mhm.
no money,
Yeah.
what would you recommend that someone like me start doing now to eventually build a passive income portfolio? Because you did say you need some money, right?
Yeah.
You can't just go and buy an apartment complex,
Yeah.
or you can't just go buy a bunch of land
Mhm.
and for oil and gas, right?
Right.
So what is something that you recommend that we start doing now as younger people to eventually catch on to that?
There's a few things you got to understand. And this is what I wish I would have known even earlier, right? The real secret, like the formula for creating wealth in life, and I even mean like financial wealth, right? Is that you got to stop asking, how do I make more money?
Mhm.
Because people have asked that for hundreds of years and they still die broke, right? So that question is not powerful enough. You got to really get to the core of what creates money, what causes money. And what you realize is this, is that all wealth, everything great in life for that matter, and this is even beyond money, comes from value. What kind of value can I offer that will serve people in a way, solve problems for them, or add value to where money is just a natural exchange? So stop asking, how do I make more money? Ask, how can I create more value? How can I create a win-win for somebody? How can I give them what they want? When you start asking that question more and start to problem solve on that, and how could I even use my time and my talents and all the things that I have, how do I use that in a way to serve these people and solve problems for them? You'll start to realize that money will come much more easily. It's not luck. It's not winning the lottery. It's not waiting for some rich uncle to die. It's literally about how can I create value for more people all the time? And if you live life that way, you'll start to realize that money's easy. You start to realize that receiving more love is easy. Everything becomes easier when you do that. And so the first thing I would do, right, is start to ask that question. And what can I offer people? What can I do to offer value? And you'll have to discover that, right? You might have to play around with it a little bit. But I'll tell you, you'll know when you're on the right track when you start getting offered more money. And even if you have an employer that treats you like crap, I can promise you there's going to be somebody else that if they see the value you create, they'll want to take you. I did the same thing with a salesperson that she was working in auto sales. She was actually my sister-in-law, working in auto sales for 8 years, did amazing work, but they treated her horribly. And I told her, I was like, you know what? If you came working for me, you could make more money with less time. You could actually stay home with your daughters and not be working 50 hours a week. And I was like, I think you're a good enough salesperson to do it. But you got to learn about money, right? Because that was not the thing that she was in. totally trained her, based on what I had learned in investing and everything else, so that she could actually go and qualify her clients. And then she's now making more money than she did at a dealership while working like maybe 10 hours a week.
Wow.
I mean, amazing. So that's the thing, is that it's always about the value you can offer and always trying to find ways to keep serving people and adding value. Build up your income. And if that means starting a side hustle because you're getting capped because of the job you're in, so be it. Do it. Especially if you're young in your 20s. Man, if you got the energy, do it. Like, find ways to start getting that money, build up that income. Don't even worry about passive income for now. Build up your income and then try to capture everything you can, right? So don't blow it all. Don't go buy that fancy car, which I did, by the way, in my 20s. It was so dumb.
Which car?
I bought a Mercedes E500. That was the first nice car I bought. Bought it for, at that point, it was at $60,000. And I even had to get credit help from my dad even to qualify for it, because I had the income, but I didn't have the credit history at that point. And so bought the nice car. The payment was like $1,100 a month, which again, 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago now when I bought that, actually, that's almost like having a $2,000 some odd $100 a month payment on your car, right? If you can imagine that, buying a $100,000 plus car today, that's what it was like.
Wow.
So I did it, but of course it was just a hunk of metal. The only person that actually really complimented my car was this 18-year-old kid who I swear just wanted to lick my rims. He's like, "This is my dream car." It's like, yeah, but it's it. I mean, it's just a car, right? You drive around, it's nothing. A house is just a bunch of rubble thrown together, right? Like, it's just a bunch of materials thrown together. It's not that great. And so if you can capture every dollar you can, build up that cash. I mean, build up your own savings first. Then I teach strategies like we talk about a certain strategy like max ROI, infinite banking, where you can get your money to pay a little bit more than you get at the bank. Use the build there. You can do a lot of different strategies to where eventually, if you get into the 6 figures of savings, now you got some options to start getting that money working for you. And by the way, you don't even have to. I mean, there are some strategies you can use right now without a lot of money. For example, if you've got credit and you've got some good income and you could qualify for some kind of mortgage, who's to say you couldn't go and actually buy like a house and then rent out a room? Or if it has a mother-in-law apartment, rent that out. Or if you buy a duplex, rent that out. You might even have to get a credit partner with your parents, because if you don't have the credit, then who does? That's what I did with my car, right?
Yeah.
I started asking the better questions. I'm like, well, if I don't have the credit history, who does? My dad. And he was like, should I co-sign on this? Which, by the way, it was bad because the recession hit. It was not fun for him. I did pay him back, but we had to get out of that from under that car. But like those kind of things, right? You can actually use that to your advantage. So like start to find ways to do it. You can buy a house with 3% down, like down payment, instead of buying an investment property with 20% down. So if you buy your own house for 3% down, you can rent out a room or rent out a unit or something like that. Maybe that will pay for your own rent, pay your own mortgage payment. So then you pay nothing out of pocket, allowing you to get more cash, use that more money to be able to make more with it. So there's things you can do, right? I mean, like I said, side hustles, maybe a little bit of side income with renting out rooms or whatnot. They call it a BRRRR strategy. You can renovate properties if you're good with your hands. I'm not, but there's a lot of things you can do. But for the most part, just focus on how can I deliver value for people, build as much cash as you can until you get at least 100, 150,000, then start looking for ways to invest it passively.
Awesome. Sweet. I think the thing that initially came to my mind is there is something that I say 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, we're all like good at that. We all really like, whether it be the gym, whether it be I like social media, I like movies, I like all of these things. I like fashion, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are tons of businesses and tons of people who have money, who want to know more about these things, who could use your skills on stuff that you like and enjoy, that would pay a lot more than you're making at a food truck.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think if you think, all right, well, I read this in a planner. So I have a productivity planner that I've started using, and it has a little quote. And it's like, I think the quote for today was, don't ask, what should I do? Ask what would excite me. And I really like that. I feel like it ties in. Do what excites you. And not only will that passion show through, but your expertise will also show through.
Right.
And your desire. And people will, and I guess you'll be more trustworthy because it is something that you like.
Yeah.
You want to continue doing. And so I'm thinking, if you are a gym junkie, right? Maybe you go and you find people to personally train.
Yeah.
And people would pay for that because they see you have this expertise. You know what I should and shouldn't do because you've done it for yourself.
Yeah.
And so I do enjoy that. And then eventually, when you build up that cash flow, you will be able to, like you said, start to invest
Yeah.
in more passive income.
I like the nuance you put there, right? Because a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, just do what you love and the money will follow,
Mhm.
which is kind of a lie. Because the truth is, like, if you love going to the beach and just sitting and tanning at the beach,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to make a lot of money. Maybe if you have an OnlyFans page, maybe, right? But let's be honest, like, you're not going to be making money doing
No one's
that.
going to be paying to see me.
No,
Let's be
yeah,
honest.
that's true. Yeah, for us white boys, nobody cares, right?
No.
But here's what I would say if you put it in the right context: is do what you love that others love you doing, and then the money can follow. Because it comes back to that value creation, right? Because just because you love it, nobody cares if you really love it. But what they do care about is if you do something that actually serves them. They always want, because people are always asking, whether they say it or not, they're always asking, well, what's in it for me, right? When they're looking to buy a product or a service, they're saying, well, how does this make my life better? That's the same question you should be asking as well, is how does this make their life better? Not my life, their life. But you're right. If you have a passion for it, there's this multiplier effect that happens, right? I learned this actually ballroom dancing here at this university. When I was doing that, I didn't start dancing until I was 18. And then I took 2 years off to go be a volunteer missionary.
Mhm.
And then I came back to do it again. And by the time I was in my 4th year of college, so my 4th year of dancing, I was starting to beat people in competition that had been dancing since they were like 4 or 5 years old. And it wasn't because I was naturally talented, because I can promise you, if you saw the way I danced in the beginning, there was zero natural talent with this guy, okay? But here's what did happen is that, remember, I love teaching, right? And so when I would learn something and I would notice that somebody's like trying to do stuff, I would be like, oh yeah, it's like this. Let me show you. So I would learn and I would teach it. And as I taught it, I learned more and I got perfecting it, right? So naturally, I became the fastest learning student because I had to teach it. And when I started to do that, where some of those guys, they're like, I hired a professional to do this. I'm not teaching you anything. And so they would just keep it to themselves. They stayed selfish with it, right? They didn't prosper. They didn't actually get a lot better as fast as I did, where I was able to move up through the ranks much faster because I was helping other people with it. And there's a life lesson to that as well, right? It's that, again, it wasn't just the fact that I liked teaching. That was true too. And I was using a strength that I like to teach and do it simply. But also there's a passion. I just love dancing. And the truth is I like to touch girls, in a good way, dancing, right? Like dancing with girls, doing stuff like that, right? Like that's kind of fun. And so be able to do something that I felt like I could be good at just was like a drug for me. I wanted to do it more and more. And so I'd practice it more and I'd try to learn to do it better and everything else. And that's what got me better to the point where I went from really zero to one of the nation's top amateur ballroom dancers, right? In just 4 years. And so I don't ascribe it to natural talent. It's really about that joy, that passion that you have. And when you tie your passions in with the skills that you have too, you mesh them together, you have this unique thing that creates an accelerant on your thing there. And so same thing with money, right? I'll tell you, I actually used to be a stock coach at one point. They hired me not because I'd had a lot of stock trading experience, but because as a financial advisor, I had teaching experience.
Oh.
So they hired me as a coach they said, I know you have no trading experience at all, but if we hire you a coach, we'll teach you to trade the way that we teach people, like our students. So they started to teach me. I was literally in the program for a couple weeks, and the next thing you know, I'm teaching other people how to do it. But again, because I was starting to practice it myself, I was starting to have a little fun with it. The thing that's interesting is that as a coach, because I came more from the perspective of the clients, that they were selling sometimes up to $50,000 to go in these programs, right? But because I came from their perspective, I said, here's what I learned. Here's what's really cool. And I would teach it in a certain way where some of those other guys would just use all the lingo and jargon and they wouldn't have a clue what they're saying. I would dumb it down to their level. And so out of over 50 coaches in that company, I was the second highest ranking coach for feedback from the clients. The only one that beat me is because the guy was an animal. The guy worked like 50 hours a week. So it's only because he had more clients, he beat me out. But percentage-wise, I had more people giving me higher feedback scores than anybody in that company. Not because I was the best stock trader, but because I was able to take that talent of teaching and apply it to them, and it helped them get better, right? And so you use that, like use your talents, combine with your passions, and use that together, and you'll find that it doesn't matter what the competition is out there, you'll kick the crap out of all of them. And the same thing has worked for me in this money industry and everything else that I've been in, is that it's always about taking those talents and those passions together in unison and always asking, how do I create value for these people? What do they want? And how can I uniquely give it to them that no one else can?
Awesome. Yeah. I think something that a kind of a mindset shift that I think is pretty valuable that I've had recently
Mhm.
is that there is enough success for you out there. Like
Yeah.
there's never going to be too many successful people that you can't do it.
Mhm.
And it's kind of hard to grasp because it's like almost internal, like, oh, if they succeed, I can't,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm always in a constant competition with all of these other people, all these other entrepreneurs, all the people here at school,
Mhm.
like, and it's almost something that as you are, like, if you are entrepreneurial, it is kind of a competitiveness
Yeah.
and or like an athlete, right? You just want to beat everybody,
Mhm.
but you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that I had a mindset shift on recently that I have to think. You were saying, yeah, you'll kick the crap out of all these people. And my initial
Mhm.
thought is, yes, yeah, I want to, right? And then I also think, like, oh, but who am I competing with?
Right.
I'm competing with myself.
That's right.
And there is enough success for that guy. And there was enough success for you.
Yeah.
And they'll never run out of it just because you can do whatever you want to do as
Mhm.
long as you pursue it, as long as you put in the work. And I mean, there's a little bit of luck in there as well, but
Yeah.
yeah, I that was a great mindset shift that I had recently that I thought would be a nice little nugget to share on this podcast.
Yeah, that's a good
No.
point because like there's a lot of competition people in my field, some that try to talk about cash flow, right? I mean, literally one of my old partners is teaching my stuff, you
Mhm.
know. But, the one thing I realized, it took me about 15 years ago before I realized it, was that no one can beat you at being you. Now, if you try to compete and be like somebody else, you will lose every time, right? If you try to imitate somebody else's success, people say, oh, just imitate somebody else's success and you'll get there. No, you'll never will. You will never be that person, right? You will never be a freaking Elon Musk. And not to mention, I don't think it'd be healthy to be Elon Musk, honestly, but you just won't be him.
Yeah.
He is the best at being Elon Musk that Elon Musk can be. You can't be him, right? But you can be the best version of you. And when I realized that, I realized like, wait a minute, there's people in my space that they're starting to teach my stuff, right? They're starting to teach the stuff that I created because I am an innovator. Like I do create. I'm always trying to build a better mousetrap, right? That's part of my personality. And I'm very competitive too, by the way, but I'm very quietly competitive. That's why I do marathons because you
Yeah.
compete against yourself, but at the same time, you want to beat the other guy. You just
Yeah.
won't tell him, right? But it's true. Like I'm
Like,
the same way. But it's more than just trying to beat a person to beat them into like that zero sum game you're talking about where someone has to lose for you to win, or if you lose then they'll win, right? Or vice versa, if you win they lose. It's not that way at all. There's more than enough abundance and prosperity for everybody. But when I started to run my own race, right? Like just like when I'm running my own race as a marathoner, if I'm running my own race and I'm just trying to be the best version of me, they can't keep up. They will suffer, they will suck, and they will do nothing. I mean, there's people literally teaching my stuff from over 10 years ago that have already evolved since then. So they're teaching my old stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, that's good, but this is better. Like this is evolved, this is even more efficient, this is better, or you'll get better results doing this than this. I mean, I'm always doing that. They cannot keep up with that kind of innovation. That's the same way that most people can't keep up with Elon Musk when he said, I'm going to build a family vehicle that's going to go from 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds. And people are like, yeah, right. Oh, and it's electric powered? Yeah, right. Like there's no powered electric. And what does he do? He
boom.
creates a freaking Tesla that does that, right?
Yep.
Because people thought it wasn't possible. But he's like, how can I make this work? And he just used his own gifts and abilities to do that. So yeah, stop worrying about everybody else and just be amazing at who you are. And no one else can compete with that.
I agree. Yeah, no one else can compete with that.
Yeah.
Are there any other just nuggets of wisdom before we close out this podcast that you can just drop on us that you think could be useful for the people listening?
Well, I hope you're not choking on all the nuggets we already gave you. Like some,
I know there's a lot.
big
There's a
ones.
lot.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that if there's anything else that you wanted to share that you think would be really valuable for the people listening, now's your shot.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say this. I mean, obviously you can follow our podcast, the Money Ripples podcast, and there's a lot of topics we cover, and sometimes it talks about this very thing we're talking about here. But I would just say this is just wherever you are right now is perfect, right? Like don't get caught in that gap where you think, well, here's what the ideal, especially if you're in the entrepreneur game, you're like, yeah, but I'm not there yet. I will just tell you, no matter where you are in that process, you will always find people ahead of you, people that seem more prosperous than you are. And it doesn't matter if you make millions, because I've been there, I've done it, right? It doesn't matter if you make millions, you're not going to solve all your problems. The best thing you do is just be happy in the journey and just keep delivering value. Like I said, keep trying to serve people, find out what can I give, because those that are willing to give and also ask in return will receive.
Perfect. Well, Chris, this has been a real treat. I'm glad that you were able to come and talk with me. I've learned a lot more than I knew before, and that's something that I always strive to do on these podcasts.
You better say, I just learned more than I expected. You're like, I didn't think I'd get that out of you.
No, I don't even know. I don't even know what I expected. I just knew that I knew who you were. I knew a little bit about you, and I was like, let's deep dive into who Chris is. Will you say your mission statement one more time now that we've kind of talked about who you are, right? And what you do. Let's
now we have the context behind it. Yeah. So I establish higher standards of service, perseverance, and stewardship to create happy, fruitful lives.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, to whoever may need this nugget of encouragement, things will be alright, so quit your work.